All right. All right. Looks like we're live, folks. So, what we have going on today, I'm going to give folks a chance to join. Um, if you're joining from Facebook, I can see your messaging. If you join from YouTube, I can see your messaging. I can't see the messaging if you're joining from LinkedIn. I'm not live streaming to a lot of different spots like I typically do. I typically will live stream to Rumble, to Instagram, to all these other social sites. Right now, I'm just going to do a live stream here on Facebook, the various Facebook pages, and I'll do a live, and the live stream will go to YouTube, and that live stream will also go to YouTube and LinkedIn. So it'll be on LinkedIn as well, right? So if you want to join or chat, just join the chat window and let me know. Again, the only chats that are going to come through are from Facebook and YouTube. I'm not sure where folks are actually coming from. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I want to share with you a real quick thing that I've been doing, this policy forensics. If you're following me on Facebook, you know I've written a bunch of articles, and those articles are actually being curated by various AI agents that I've written. I have a big background in AI and using agents. So what I've decided to do is take a look at policies, especially policies here across Vermont that are being introduced by the legislature, to understand exactly what they do. And you have to realize these policies are convoluted, they're big. There's a lot of stuff buried in there. I really don't believe that the number of policies that are coming out and the background of our elected officials, particularly here in Vermont, are conducive to really them understanding the bills. This is going to be Vermont centric, right? So for those of you listening, this is going to be how I can analyze and how we analyze policies that are being written, have been proposed. So I go out every morning. I have an app that goes out to the Vermont legislative website, and it gets all the information about the new policies that are being proposed, or policies where they are in their life cycle in the legislator, so I can track them through. I have a specialized grading system, so as policies come out, my agents read it, it characterizes it, it gives it a tag. This is a tax increase, this is healthcare. So it tags those policies to make it easy for me, and it also gives them a rating, like a high, like this. It gives it a point rating. If it's high, it's something we should be concerned about. And what this does, it gives me the ability to look across every committee, every policies that's being introduced, and understand what's going on there. Now, why do this, and why understand, and why do we have to do this, and why am I doing this? So number one, policies are hard to read. They're written in legalese, right? Policies have buried stuff in them, and they can be contradictory, right? So we can have one policy that contradicts another policy. I have a specially programmed large language model where I can put all my policies in place, and then it aggregates them. It does the raw policy as well as my analytics, brings them together, and it says, "Oh, these are some interesting contradictions in these bills and stuff like that," which is a lot of fun, right? So these so right now it's a hobby, and I have some people paying me for the service, right? This is meant to be a paid for service. This isn't I'm going to do this for free. Hey Dan, I'm interested in this policy. What does it really tell you? And we'll break down what the policies actually do. So this is a fee for a service fee, but it's really good. Now, why do I believe it's so good? Well, I do things a couple ways, right? So my background is in strategy and change analytics, right? Big data and the AI stuff, all wonderful stuff in business turnarounds. So what I've done is I've done a strategic assessment of the state of Vermont, a very detailed strategic assessment like you would get from a major corporation, right? And it's a very objective assessment of where we are. So here is where Vermont is. And I can do this for any state, any municipality, any county. It works, the data all works the same, and it's trained on what data to go get, right? So for number one, if you're afraid of AI and you think AI is always wrong, this isn't for you. This isn't going to be for you. And if you think this is bogus, I put in the window. What is a better method and what is a better source of data? Tell me you found something better and you found some errors. So, number two, people will say, hey, Dan, you're using AI. AI can be wrong. Yep. Just like humans, right? AI can be wrong, just like humans, right? AI can hallucinate. Yep, just like humans, but AI can't be corrupted like humans either, right? So think about it from those perspectives. So what you're going to see, I am going to just give you a little quick outline of what it is that I've done and why. You can see some slides how we go through it. I'm going to show you the aspects of how I can't show you the agents. That's proprietary. Good luck. I know I shared my output with some people. And damn it, if we live in a freaking crooked world right now. Damn it, if they didn't go out and try to replicate this on their own so they wouldn't have to pay me. But again, my models learn. So my models learn. As I as I go through, I can read the comments, I can retrain them and learn. So I have like retrained models. But yeah, everyone wants something for nothing and everyone's stealing each other's properties. No, there's no honor, I guess, among thieves. So let's just get right to it. So I'm not going to share with you the strategic assessment that I did for the state of Vermont. It's very detailed and it's really hard to understand unless you're a strategist. And I did share that. Maybe I'll come back and share it at the end of what it looks like. And it's nothing. It's like 99.9% of the people out there have never really been involved in hardcore strategic planning and assessments of where we are and using all the different frameworks that we have there. But maybe I'll share it at the end if we have some time. I just want to blow through this real quickly. If there's any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat, right? You can just drop them in the chat. So we've done a detailed analysis. Now, what I discovered is when I was talking to some clients and they said, hey, if I write a bill, can it analyze the bill to check for all the gaps? And I said, holy cow, yeah, it can do that as well. So as people write bills or are reviewing bills, it will find all the gaps. And let me just share some slides with you. I know just to get a quick snapshot of what it is that we do. Now, this analysis is also customizable. So I have 5 or 6 tenants that I could put in there, and I could have the bill analyzed against those values. Think about the pillars as values, right? So one of mine is smaller government, lower taxes, right? So if it leads to an expansion of government in any way, it flags it as a negative, right? If it leads to higher taxes, it's going to flag it as a negative. So it's written from a libertarian conservative perspective, but it's customized, right? So I can customize it any which way. I also have I have a conservative group in particular that are writing bills, and they wanted the bill analyzed because what I can do, you'll see what the app actually does is really freaking cool. What it does, it's going to help them find points where the other party might shoot it down. So if you're a conservative, you're writing a bill, let's say you're writing a gun bill, right, or pro gun or pro something out there, the app is customizable to look at it from a very progressive anti-government person and poke holes in the bill so you can tighten it up and you're not going to get a bunch of mistakes, right? So that's a really cool thing. So let me do this here. I am going to share a screen. We'll just go through real quick. There's some talking points here that you might find interesting. And it was in the recorded thing, but this is the live cast, so you can ask questions. Don't text me. If you're on Facebook, don't text me questions. Just go ahead and drop them in the Facebook, right? And if you have any assumptions, there's going to be a lot of assumptions out there. And I'm telling you, the thing that's driving me crazy are the anti-AI people and the people that are saying it's hallucinates, it's not as good as humans. BS. So you just might want to leave right now because this will scare you. And it should scare you. So let me share. I'm going to share my screen. Let me share this presentation. I'm going to slow down. I'm not going to go into full-blown presentation mode. Folks, this isn't a live webinar where we have to be all fancy. So let's just talk about what it does, right? So we have all these bills right here. Think about it. And in this, I live in the state of Vermont. Basically, the state of Vermont is bankrupt, right? We have a shrinking population. We have expensive housing. We have expensive taxes. We have a horrible an expensive, horrible education system, and the state is basically imploding. Right. So that is what my strategic assessment of the state is. And I'm telling you, the people I've shared that strategic assessment with are just mind blown. It takes a lot of time to help them to understand it, but there is a lot of noise in these bills. And remember, I'm taking these bills, and not only am I analyzing the bills from the five pillars that I've laid out, I'm also analyzing it against the strategic assessment of the state of Vermont. So it's looking at it not only from my perspective, but which is admittedly, conservative, libertarian leaning, but it's also looking for other issues within the state. So it's going to give us clarity, right? It's repeatable, it's reproducible. And my agents, I constantly refine and teach my agents how to diagnose it and how to write things better up so the average person can understand it. So what we have is this. There's actually many components of what I do. So what I'm going to share with you right here is I'm just going to share with you the policy forensics. And what you're going to say, what does it do? Well, believe it or not, it's more reading. This is really for the policy analyst, right? If you're taking a 14-page bill, a 20-page bill, how do you break it down consistently? How do you discover amendments that should be written? How do you discover ways you think they're going to market it? How do you counter the market? What are the red flags in the bill? What's the missing data, right? Most people, when you're reading a bill, you're just reading it. This goes through and starts flagging all that stuff and bringing things up. So it might be long. So the output might be longer than the bill, but that's meant for the forensic. It's meant for the policy person. There's a second component here, which breaks out that analysis into 3 or 4 pages, and that is meant to give to the legislator or talking points about the bill. So we're taking a 14-page bill, we're dissecting that bill like it's never been dissected before, and then we're summarizing it into key talking points about what actions we believe a legislator should take on a bill. And the bill we're going to do here is it's Vermont Senate Bill 264, which is giving the assistant states attorneys generals the ability to unionize, right? So just imagine that. So we're going to, if we had a lawsuit against the Vermont State Employees Union, we're going to have our own unionized work laws assistant attorneys suing them or maybe siding with them. It's kind of funny. And then we can triage these reports, and that last report there is the one that we give to the legislators. And again, these are some of the categories of what we have now. What makes this prompt so what makes these prompts and agents so interesting is that you have to know the right questions to ask, and you have to train it. Here's the question I'm asking, here's the response, right? Most people, when they're training agents or AI, they'll just put in two sentences, and then they say, hey, they either gave me what I liked or what I didn't like, right? So you have to realize my prompts are like, and the agents that my prompts are the prompts that my agents are working with are 15 pages long, maybe 20 pages long. How many of you have ever gone into Gemini or Chat GPT and wrote 15 pages of exact instructions of what it is you're looking for? So what it does, it gives us a summary of the bill, because remember, these bills are all legalese. It gives us like a one-page executive briefing. What is the bill really about? And then it gives us the mechanisms about how this bill would really operate. When you look at a bill, it doesn't really tell you how it's going to operate. I have an operations background, so I'm always thinking, all right, how do we make this thing actually work? And it's going to give it a score against those scorecards. Remember, mine is big government, taxes, all those things. So it's going to give me a score of that bill. It's going to say, hey, based on the criteria you put in, here's that score of that bill. Pretty cool, I know, right? Thanks. Yeah. Again, Thanks for coming on the live feed, the McKinsey guys. Yeah, yeah. This is my. You're not getting this. Winners and losers and power shifts. Who are the winners and losers in the bills? Right. Every bill has a winner and loser. We don't like to talk about it. And then where does the power shift to? A verdict. Do we accept? Do we oppose this bill? Do we strongly support this bill based on our tenets? And remember, it's also looking out at the strategic assessment of the state of Vermont. I guarantee you the strategic assessment that I did for the state of Vermont is probably the most comprehensive strategic assessment that's been done. I don't know if this, I don't believe the state has hired any larger consulting. I know the guys from McKinsey here are laughing. You guys weren't hired, right, to come in and do a full blown external assessment like I did. It's going to give us amendments or fixes. If we can't kill the bill, right, if this bill's coming through, what amendments will make it more palatable to our side? I know in the state of Vermont, we there was a supermajority, a progressive Democrat supermajority in the past. It didn't matter. They were just if the governor, or if our governor vetoed a bill, they would just override his veto and just send it through. And a lot of people believe that supermajority is actually going to return here. But this is like a detailed amendment of what how we can make this bill actually better. And then cross-examine questions set. I said, okay, if we there's so many in these bills, there's so many unanswered questions, and we have a citizen legislator in Vermont. So you guys in DC, yeah, you have a different in Maryland. You have professional legislators. They've been, and executives and stuff like that. We have a citizen legislator here. So these are questions that we need to ask to ensure that to get clarity around the bills. And then this internal section 9 is meant to be an internal assessment. This would be, you would never, if you're a policy forensic, a policy analyst, you will never share section 9 with anybody, because this is how the bill will be marketed by whoever submitted it. And then this is how we counter that argument so that we're not looking like crazies or wackos. That internal strategic posture is really good. And then the limitations and the next steps, right? So when we analyze this bill, there's limitations in there. There's missing data for the most part that we acknowledge. So it creates a list of limitations from that initial assessment, and then how we should move forward from there. And then next possible steps. If we're looking at this bill and it's really horrible, it's going to say, hey, look, we need this information to make a stronger assessment on the bill. And then, like here's a scorecard. A scorecard can be anything. We can customize it. If you're a progressive, we can customize it for progressive. If you're a conservative, we can customize it for you. If you're a communist, it can be customized for you, the communist, right? I haven't gotten an email from Mandami yet, but so we can take these heavy reports and really dissect them. As a matter of fact, the SAVE Act. I did the SAVE Act, right? So I was able to download the SAVE Act that's in the and break it down from a conservative perspective. And it's just a lot of fun to understand what's going on. This is going to help us understand here. If we're going to turn this over to legislators, we want to say, hey, we want you to oppose this bill. And then here are the key themes why. So we give them the information that's actually in the bill and things they may not have considered, right? This is thinking very deeply, especially from our pillars and especially from a state strategic assessment that I guarantee you most people have never seen. Pretty cool. The analysis, let's just get right to it. This talks about how we actually go breaking it down. I break this down like we would at a large consulting firm. You have to remember, I worked for a powerhouse of a consulting firm. I worked at powerhouse consultants. So this is breaking a bill down in a way that executives, board level executives can look at it, right? So, we've worked with Fortune 50 companies. I did this with the Department of Defense, breaking down these bills and then understanding the flaws, right? When we look at these bills, people do often, you see it all the time. Every legislator will say, well, correlation is not causation. Yeah. All right. Well, give me an example of that, right? Articulate it for me. What does that really mean? They don't know, right? They got their speaking points. But what we can do is we break it down into nice, neat little buckets so that we can analyze it and we don't fall into political gobbledygook speak, right? Where people all they want to talk about is fear and obligation and guilt, right? So we actually break it down into something different. Here are some methods that we use. If you're from a large, yeah, right, yeah. McKinsey, IBM Strategy, Deloitte, all you guys, all you professional consultants get this. But this is, thanks for joining, but this is meant for the average person, right? So the situation, what's the current situation? What's the complication? What's the question we need to be asking? And what's that answer? The bills aren't broken out that way. So I break out the bills in that way. And then again, we talk about mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. How do we break the bill apart so we can attack or analyze unique, distinct portions, right? Rather than blending things together and going down bunny holes. You'll find one of the first things that politicians learn when they're asked a question, a direct question, they'll re-ask the question in a favorable way to them. If you ask them for specifics, they're going to blend things together. They're not going to isolate and answer each part of the question, right? So there's things that politicians do to avoid you to deflect from you understanding the individual components. We break that out. Who's this for, right? Yeah, this is really the detailed reports coming out of this is really for the lobbying firms who's lobbying and getting that and the analytics behind it, right? I think I haven't, I need to do this. I need to go out and find the kill rate or the win rate of these bills. So, for instance, the kill rate would be anyone who received my analytics. How were they able to kill these bills with the analysis, or the win rate? Anybody who used my app to write a bill and then have the analyzer from the opposing side, what that win rate was actually like. So these are the people that really use this. If you're an individual person or like a news agency, you don't have the time or money to do this. This is high end. This is really important stuff. And then the ability for my agents to run these apps. These agents run 24/7 with no breaks. There's QA built into the engines. So I can take a bill that's been rewritten and quickly tear it apart again, and then reanalyze it. So that's just basically what we've done there. Let me just check for questions again. All right, yeah, yeah. Let's see. The questions are: is it customizable? Yeah, the five. Let me go back. All right, so I'm looking at the questions. So the pillars. This is what we're talking about, right? This pillar scorecard here is that pillar scorecard. Yeah, it's totally customizable based on whatever values that you have and that you want to put in there. I can do 5 to 7 of them, and it's going to analyze it from those values. And yes, yeah, again, yeah, I said that earlier. You can use it to analyze your own bills from someone else's perspective to understand how they can possibly kill your bill. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Thanks. It is really, it's really cool. So let's get into it and just take a look at a bill and tell me, I'm just going to scroll through this bill real quick. And, the question is, how can you really analyze it? And how can you ensure that you can make a good argument for or against the bill? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually change the screen. I'm going to share with you I'm going to share with you the actual bill that was written. I think this is the bill. Yep. Let me share with you the bill. So this is the bill here. You can see this bill here is S264. And you can see, this is the actual bill that's out there on the website. So my agents will run every night around 4 a.m. I get an update of new bills introduced, bills whose status has changed, and that means they might have been read, and I get bills that are old. So it looks at all the old critical bills. If that bill has been brought back, or sometimes in Vermont they call it taken off the wall, it knows it, so it gets a status change in the state system. My system brings it down and says, "Hey, Dan, you need to be alerted. this bill came off the wall. So I get every single bill that's out there. I get a data dump on every morning at 4 a.m. So here you can see it states simply this bill proposes to allow assistant attorney generals to organize. And then it says it's an act relating to the collective bargaining of attorney generals, right? And then it goes through and it has the definitions, right? Here's what the definitions are. And just think about it. Can you imagine giving this like a Vermont high school where we're in the lower 25th percentile? They couldn't get past page one, I don't think, unfortunately. Describes collective bargaining, what it means, a state employee, what office, or as a full-time deputy sheriff paid by the state and pursuant to this. So you can see already this is doing a lot of definitions. And if you're analyzing this by hand, you're like, oh, which pillar does this affect? And how do I score and judge it? You can see we can go down. So this you can find on a website. It is, like I said, let me come back up here, S264. So it's a 14-page bill, and it goes through the gobbledygook of what it means. But my app also, what it does is, and you're going to see the results of that here in a second, it will take explicit sections stated in the bill, and then it also makes inferences. Well, based on this, and it labels it, so we don't have to worry. So again, for all the people out there afraid of AI and are you either adopt AI or lose your job to AI, unless you're a tradesperson. But it can go through and make inferences for me to check. And what it does is when it makes those inferences, it labels it as an inference so that I know I can go back and check it. It's saying, we think this can be a possibility. Go back and check it. Now, how many policy analysts or people reading these bills can say, look, this is explicitly stated in the bill, and here's an inference that we made, right? People tend to blend all that together or try to market their opinion into this. So you can see it goes through the management rights of the governor of Vermont, and it's all in legalese, ensuring consistency in terms. So you get the idea. So here is an example of one of those bills. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share another. Let me share my analysis of that bill. So I'm going to come back here, and this is where it gets interesting, and this is where it's going to get overly technical, right? People are concerned, hey, my rights are being taken away and stuff. Well, I get it. You need to be engaged. You need to understand what the bills are doing, but you can't just have some boilerplate rejection of this, right? So I had someone read one of my write to me about a bill they were interested, and what they did is gave me Fox News talking points that weren't specific. I said, you need to be more specific about what it is you're looking at and what you're concerned about. And this is going to give us that ability to do so. So let me come back here. That's not it. Give me a second. I am going to share with you the analysis. Give me right here. Let's see. So here, I got too many things I'm sharing. Let me stop sharing that. Let me stop sharing that. Let me make sure I am sharing the right thing with you now. Perfect, right? So right now, you should see the bill, my analysis of the bill. And this is, it's pretty cool, right? So here, you can see it's an assessment of the bill. It was prepared by me, right? But, this can be white labeled if you wanted to label it for yourself. And it's just giving us the outline of the bill, who introduced it, right? Again, my agents went out and ran this. Now, there's new agents that are out there for me to test and upgrade to. So this was ran last week, and believe it or not, it's already outdated. I have newer agents that can be more thoughtful and better reasoning in this process. So here it just gives us a summary of that bill, right? It proposes to allow the state attorneys generals to have collective bargaining and so on, right? Just like we said. And then here's the thing that most people need to be considered about, including last best offer, right? So keep that in mind. That is an important sticking point, right? If you're the average person, you're like, what does that actually mean? So here it tells you the scope and definitions. And you can see here where it says explicit text. This is telling us explicitly what it is in the bill, and it's trying to make it understandable to the average person. I'm not a lawyer, right? So I don't really understand some of the legalese terminology. And then here it tells you where in the bill it is, right? So again, if you're a forensic analyst, right? I'm doing the work for you. I can do it quicker. I can do it more thoroughly. I can have it explicitly stated. I can tell you the page number of where it got the text from. It says state employees. It provides a definition, the meaning of that definition, right? Employer, who is the employer, defined as by the Office of the Attorney General, represented by the Attorney General or designee. And then down here it says unknown, right? And this is probably known, right? It's not clear in the bill. The bill refers to the board repeatedly, but does not define it in that shown text. It appears it might be the Vermont Labor Relations Board, but who knows, right? The board can be a board of other attorney generals that get the vote on this. And then what we start to do here is we're starting to break it down, right? The bill's stated purpose is straightforward: allow assistant attorney generals to organize and bargain collectively, right? Bingo. Got it. Supporters would argue that the attorney generals face a comparable workplace issues, pay setting, right? So this should already be, this is an inference. See, it says inference. This should already be raising the hair on the back of your necks, because think about this. They might have a budget set forth, but if they go into collective bargaining and we have to accept the last best offer, that budget's out the window. We, by law, will have to pay them a greater amount of money. So let's say they want their wages to go up 25%, and that was the last best offer. Guess what? The state's going to have to come up with that money. It's not in the budget. Where do we get it from? So that should be very concerning, especially in Vermont, given the current financial situation that we're in. And then it says here, this is an inference, right? Supporters would also argue that the bill preserves fiscal checks because agreement effective is repeatedly tied to appropriations, not automatic spending. So we need to check that to see what happens there. And then it says, here's the baseline. Again, there's some unknowns, right? We have no idea, no baselines provided for the number of ADs, existing compensation structure, turnover. So there's a bunch of metrics in here that we have no idea of anything about. And that's not uncommon. In the state of Vermont, where we have an elected citizen legislator, a lot of them are really missing that operational acumen that strategists really have and operations people have to break this down and say, oh, is this really something that's implementable? That's something, this this problem isn't unique to Vermont, but it's more obvious in the state of Vermont. So, and in complications, what does the bill saying the problems are? So it tells us what it thinks the problems are. And then it tries to say, what is the question? What are we trying to answer here? What is this bill trying to do? Right. So here it says the stated question is narrowly implied. Should assistant attorney generals be permitted to organize and bargain collectively? Right. So let's think about this, not just from a bill, but let's think about this from a problem solving and a strategy approach. Right. And then there's an inference here. The operational policy question the bill actually triggers is bigger. Who controls the AAG compensation and work rules? Elected officials, right, or management, negotiated contracts, and so on. So it's like, now who gets to determine this, right? So just think about, in the state of Vermont, we have the highest cost per student in our education system, and we're in the lower 25th percentile, right? So there's definitely no correlation or between dollars spent and outcomes. And then here are some of the solutions or answers that we believe they're trying to get to. Now, when we get down here, we get into the situation, right? Situation, complication, question, and ask. So it's going through here and it's breaking it down in detail. Now you can see why this is meant for the policy forensic folks. These are the kind of questions that if you're a policy analyst, you're going to want to know and understand. This bill jumps from allowing bargaining to embedding a full set of impasse arbitration, and appropriation request mechanisms without explaining why the institutional expansion is warranted, right? So, is this really a problem right now? Or are we trying to head something off at the pass? And what are the unintended consequences? This is also going to highlight the unintended consequences. By the way, there is going to be another section added to these agents this weekend, where it's going to be, because this is really, I started this focused on Vermont, but what is the potential economic impact of this bill, right? So what impact does it have? And some bills will have no impact, right? Because they don't affect the economy, and others will. So that's a, upcoming thing. Um, so the bill has no fiscal estimate, right? So that's very concerning. Accountability is muddled. Decisions can be made by the board or an outside arbitrator, right? So again, yet the public will still have elected officials and cost growth. So again, they can go in there, like our unions, despite the fact that we have the highest cost per education, the union can come back at negotiation time and say, well, we know you set a budget of X, Y, and Z, but we want more money. And we go into a lawsuit or something. And guess what? We're stuck paying that more money. Uh, this is more detail than you need to require. This goes into authority and the money ledger, understanding a lot of detail behind the bills. That let's be honest, this is written by lobbyists for their to promote their clients' needs. So this is something that the policy folks would the lobbyists would turn back to the clients that are paying for this bill to be put in place and put in front of the legislator. So if you're a policy and if you're a policy analyst and a policy writer, these are all things that you're going to be concerned about, the minutia of this bill and how it may affect the client that's actually paying for this bill to be submitted. And then here it gives you, again, the highest impact ledger items, right? The bill doesn't just allow organizing, it hardwires the Office of Attorney General into a collective bargaining structures and dispute resolution pathways. That's a big deal. The board's discretion to decide one or more statewide bargaining units is a major structural choice point, right? It drives bargaining power, fragmentation, administrative load, right? Um, and then again, it goes back to all these things, right? It says here multiple sections contemplate increased costs, right? That's another one. Agreements are binding, subject to appropriations, meaning the political fight shifts from regulations to appropriations, right? So, bam, right there, we're locked into readjusting our budgets and earmarking. Here are some key mechanisms in the bill. Who's empowered, right? This tells you who's empowered. First order, this is where again, if you're not a strategist for the most part, what we do here, and let me just come back and stop sharing this for 1 second. No, we'll leave it sharing. What's the direct impact? These are the first order winners. Here, like empowered are assistant attorney generals, empowered is the board, right? Empowered is an arbitrator, empowered is the attorney general in the office of, I forgot what OEG is, that acronym. So all those people are empowered, right? They are the people that are really the winners here. And then this is the second order. The second order is, what if this happens, right? So when we do in the world of strategic planning and analysis, right, we say, okay, here are our goals, but what are the other things, the second order things that we have to hit? What are some of the unintended benefits or consequences? So here we have some of the unintended benefits and consequences listed that people don't really talk about or haven't thought about, right? And again, we have the explicit text, which might be overkill for most people, in the inference, right? We're making inferences about the bill, and this is something for us to consider and go back and check. So we're very clear about the inferences that we actually make. So you can see here the long run consequences looking 5 or 10 years out. Remember so there's an aspect of strategic planning that's not really done a lot. It's called scenario planning, where you can look out 5, 10, 20 years. You're giving it a forward looking assumption, and you say, well, the future's unknown. Yep, I understand that. So we're just making we're speculatively assuming what are the different scenarios that the future holds for us. Top. So, okay, and then this is more stuff there. It gives us our pillared scorecard. So here, the bill is being lowered. Will this bill lower taxes? If it was to lower taxes, it would get a really high score, but it doesn't, right? It's actually increasing taxes, or the possibility of increased taxes because of collective bargaining. If all of a sudden the assistant attorney generals get a double in salary, that technically might that has the potential of increasing taxes. Does it reduce the size of government? Nope. Personal economic freedom choice? Nope. Individual choice? Nope. Accountability, right? So it gets all these really, really low scores in what it can possibly do. And what it does, it breaks it out here. Now, this is the part that's customizable, right? So if you are a progressive organization, lowering taxes may not be a big concern of yours. You might say taxing the wealthy, right? Or some arbitrary a fair tax system. Does this create a fair tax system? But we need to define it, right? But here are these pillars that I have embedded into the agent as it runs now for me of my personal interest. And lower taxes, I provide examples. So it just doesn't say lower taxes, it gives me examples, right? So it takes a little effort to get this right because you want it to be trained appropriately for the agents. So then here it gives you a reasoning, the rationale for that low score, right? This bill creates pathways for increased general fund cost request, right? The attorney general must submit funding requests for any increased costs. The bill explicitly contemplates funding requests during the budget adjustment process, right? No dollar amounts are listed in there. Expanding the bargaining rights and the public payroll setting is more likely to increase compensation and benefit costs, right? So right there, you can see the details and the language it's given us. So personal economic freedom and so on. So we're just going to speed up through this. Let me see if I have any more questions in here. All the questions are coming from the consultants. Yes. Yep. How does this run? It's a learn. How do I train it? We can talk more about the technicality about how I train the model. I'm reviewing these bills, right? Even though I can crank them out quickly, if I find like a gap in there, or I have other agents, I have a QA agent that'll go back and check it, and then we're building out our knowledge base from that. So who are the winners and losers? This gives us the winner and losers. The direct winners are the assistant attorney generals. The arbitrators, the direct losers are OEG management discretion. The General Assembly process bandwidth is repeatedly routes agreements and costs into appropriations arena. So they're going to be distracted with this. The second order winners, right? There's going to be the second order winners of things. We always have to think, you can tell a strategist if they talk not only about the primary objectives and goals, but the second order things like the leading indicators and the what ifs, right? So smaller government, equity and fairness concentrate, the overall verdict. So here it gives us a verdict. Oppose this, right? And then it tells us why we want to oppose this bill. So it does the decision for you. And then it says, here are the aspects of it. And if you bought this or are using it, I can train you on how this actually thinks, right? This is using math, coding math that large language models and agents understand. And then it gives us the full rationale of why we decided to oppose this, right? And then the biggest uncertainties, here are a lot of uncertainties. These things should be known but are unknown, right? So think about it. You're writing a bill. You think you're doing a great job. You run it through here and you're like, oh my God, I have all these gaps. The kill shot, right? So this is funny. this is funny. This is funny. This is like, if we wanted to kill this bill, here's the kill shot, right? I have kill shot and safe shots, depending on where you are. This is the potential of how we can bury this bill quickly. So it goes through and it starts not arguing, but it starts making the case for it. Now, I can make this even stronger and more kill shots, right? So these are our best ways of preventing this bill from going forward. So let's say we don't like it. We're definitely agreeing. This is the beginning, right? These are some possible kill shots that would dismantle this bill. The save shots we're not going to look at because I actually want that killed. So you miss your opportunity if you're for this bill. I just blew through it. And then here are amendments to make it more acceptable. If we can't kill the bill, who's laughing? Yeah, I knew that the person that's laughing their head off sent me a text message. I get it. Yeah, they love this one. So this is amendments that we can put in place, right? Again, we're a lobbying group, right? We have a client we're lobbying for. We're trying to, they bought they bought this legislation. They want it passed. And let's say we're an opposing organization. Let's say we're some conservative organization that believes in less taxes, smaller government, and so on. And we can't necessarily kill the bill, although there is a stronger way. There's a add-on where I can actually make it extraordinarily impossible to pass the bill because it includes social media, and we'll talk about that later on. But so here are strategies and amendments that would make this bill less damaging, if you will, or more palatable to our organization. So it goes through and lists out the amendments. It will do, depending on the bill, it'll do up to 15, right? And then here are the questions. These are really the interesting part of it. This is the questions that are probably have gone unanswered, right? Or unasked about the bill, right? How many assistant tenure judges are expected to be covered? And what is the estimated annual fiscal exposure and compensation benefits, right? It implies that there's going to be increased costs. What is the rationale for allowing either party to force arbitration, right? How will the board decide whether an AAG are in one unit or more units, and what criteria constrain the decision? So you can see these are really tough questions that you can ask. And what an organization has asked is I can take these questions and turn these into automated social media posts for your constituents. And with AI, these AI agents can run and pose these questions out there or ask it in a different way, saying this can, right, and make it write it in any way to help sell the idea of killing the bill or promoting the bill. Questions to ask about implementation, right? Here is the one that, remember, we talk about second order thinking and implementation, right? And again, we're talking in Vermont, folks, where we have a citizen legislator. They don't necessarily have an executive acumen, nor do they have an operational acumen. So this gets to the questions about how will this get rolled out and by whom, and how will we know if it's successful? This is another way of either making sure your bill is strong, or in my case, I would be asking these questions because I would be against this bill personally. Asking these questions, if there's no answers, if there aren't good answers to these questions, this is another way of killing a bill. This is the one that you shouldn't share. This is like whoever buys the service or promotes the service. This is telling you how they're going to market this bill and the narrative that can possibly be used. And if you oppose the bill, how you're going to be portrayed. And it's going to help you define your position, right? So, like here it says your strongest attack here. Well, let's look at it here. This is really interesting. This will be marketed as a basic fairness and equity bill, right? Fairness and equity, right? Two of the least definable definable words in the English language, right? Let public lawyers bargain like other public employees, right? So it's like really nice, right? And then here it says your strongest vulnerability if opposing the bill is appearing anti-worker or anti-attorney generals, right? Opponents will point out in the appropriation language, it's no blank. So now it's going to give you the language that you actually need to oppose this bill, right? This is going to be your strategic posture if you're against or for the bill. And this is how you can go about getting there. And then these are all red flags within the bill. So again, these are things that can be used to stop the bill, right? So these red flags are things that you can talk about and sell if you want this bill to be stopped. Now, on the other side of it, if you're writing a bill and you put it into the agents as, hey, analyze this bill from this other perspective, these red flags will be very interesting to you because you can help you shore up your bill and make sure that you cover these gaps, if you will. And then down here are limitations and unknowns of that bill. Unknown are the number of attorney generals. Unknown. These are all things that we believe we need to know or take into further consideration, right? Because remember, this is just a quick analysis. We gave a recommendation, but if we want to tighten it up, we have to really probably understand these items. And you may not be able to get the data, right? But it's just letting you know these are some unknown entities or quantities that you need to deal with. Analysis limitations. These are the limitations of the analysis, right? We're very clear about that. Next step research checklist items, right? Here are the things that if this is a bill we really, really cared about and we had the resources to analyze and the money to go out and analyze, these are some of the things we want to go out and further analyze potentially. And then here's like the QA section, right? We want to make sure that these bills are right. So let me go back here real quick. Oh, all the questions. Okay, great. Now you said, all right, the question, yeah, that is a lot to read. What did you give a legislator to look at? The question is, that is too much for a legislator. If the legislator is looking at 50 bills, what do we actually give the legislators, right? Well, we can give a quick presentation, but let me show you a way of making it more palatable or easier for a legislator to look at, right? So let me share that screen with you. Let me see. So here is something you can pass off, right? It's that same bill, right, that we're looking at. And right here, we start out right away, bottom line up front. We call this the bluff, bottom line up front. You get it? Oppose this bill as written. Only support if it's amended to a hard sunset, plus fiscal transparency and tight arbitration and accountability guidelines, right? So that is what we're actually looking for. Here's the executive summary. You know, someone can get their head around really quickly. Oppose this unless amended. The analysis concludes that the bill is framed as a narrow, let AAG's bargain change, but it actually embeds permanent labor relations in an arbitration governance stack with explicit increased cost funding, request pathways, no cost cap, no sunsets, right? So again, you know, this puts us on the course of the most expensive education system in the state of Vermont with with scores in the lowest 25th percentile. It gives you a little write-up about the bill. It makes it easier for a legislator or a person, maybe a marketing person, to understand. And then it talks here about your core rationale. The bill creates an uncapped fiscal exposure pipeline while refusing to size it. Here's the logic, right? And then here's the evidence from the text if they want it, right? So that's one. Here's amendment number 2, right? So again, this would be easier talking points and can be reduced to fewer talking points for a legislator to actually understand. It gets rid of all the language, all the nonsense language in there, all the definitions. It gets right down to the brass tacks, if you will, right? Amendment number 3, or excuse me, argument number 3. So it lists arguments. I kept saying amendment. I apologize. Argument 3. It's a permanent government's change packaged as a narrow eligibility fix, and then it gives you the rationale why. Argument number 4. The bill lacks the why and how much, which magnifies political risk. Right. The analysis knows that the bill does not provide findings, data, or quantified problem it is solving. Leaves the supporters with a values pitch, right? This is one of the things, again, folks, we're looking at this from a Vermont perspective. Vermont votes on values and this manufactured morality thing, right? As much as they use the word data-driven, very little of it's data-driven. If you ask for clear definitions, you don't get clear definitions. And when you do bring data to the table, they'll argue the data, and basically because they don't understand the data. And then it has critical dependencies, risks, if then, right? We're thinking second order effects, right? If the effective workforce size and baseline compensation pressures are unknown, right, then the fiscal exposure cannot be credibly bounded, right? If the board chooses one large statewide unit versus multiple, then bargaining leverage and fragmentation and administrative burden could shift materially without new legislative vote. So this is giving you all those dependencies, recommended legislative actions and details, and that is it, right? So it was a 14-page bill. You have to figure out how to analyze it, what questions to ask and everything. And we do it automatically right here on the fly. So that is the genesis, or that is basically what this app actually does. So let me get rid of that. Let me show on the screen there. So that was what this policy framework was intended to do, right? It's very scalable. So what I've created is a way to analyze bills with a perspective that you put in there. And then you can see it breaks it out into great detail about what the bill will actually do, the unintended consequences of the bill, right? The power shifts within the bills, the winners and losers within the bill, and then unknowns within the bill, right? So that's how that breaks it out. And then even more so, it will break it out into a smaller package like we just saw that you can pass off to a legislator so they can have a stronger case or a stronger argument when they're debating these bills on the floor, right? So again, the primary audience for this is really policy firms and lobbyists that are, that have been paid to write bills and introduce them into the federal system, the state system, a county system, right? Because we can narrow it down greatly. And the benefits are we put that perspective in there for you. We'll hard code, or we can even make it, yeah, I can actually change it up where you might want to change those pillars or your values on the fly. So we can change those pillars and values, and then you can analyze it from then. But so let me see. Yeah, it does it quickly. It takes a while for the agents to run and do the QA, but I can have detailed assessments out, believe it or not, in a few hours. You have to realize I've been working on the strategy side. But this actually was derived from my strategy bot. I have a strategy bot that, like, you heard me talking about the state of Vermont strategic assessment that is absolutely mind blowing. Right? So this was a derivative of that. I said, hey, can I rewrite these agents to go out and analyze these bills? And I was shocked at how good it actually turned out to be. And from that, I've just been refining it and getting feedback from some of the users about what they would like to say. So for instance, I didn't have the page number and section in there. But again, this is something that's hard to re-engineer, right? Because like I said, it's over, I want to say, within the agents, each of the agents, yeah, these are really long trained prompts and models. What else do I do with it? All right, hold on. Let me stop sharing these docs here. What else do I do with it? Right. So again, I can put all these into another mini large language model, if you will, and then we can cross them. We can compare them for contradictions. So if you're another, like, a big group and you're interested in, let's say you're interested in bills on healthcare policy, we can put all the bills that are related to healthcare policy into a custom large language model with my analysis in there, right? And we can start looking for contradictions or things that make things worse, right? Well, the downside of this bill is XYZ. We might decide it's a low risk, go for the bill, it's a low risk. But when you pass this other bill, all of a sudden the risk gets bigger, right? So just think about it. We can do all sorts of great things on that. Let me see, what other questions do I have? I'm not going to tell you yeah, it's expensive. And you can see why it's expensive. Right? Good luck recreating this. And again, at first I was really annoyed by people trying to re-engineer this on themselves. And I get it. That's the flattery of it. But yeah, yeah. I no, I don't know. Is there did I do market research on this? Yeah, I did market research on this. I couldn't find anyone else out there doing something like this. Does it work for a It'll work for any bill. And if there's data out there, or I can provide a data, I can steer it in a way. You can see the strategy document is very objective. So when I do a state strategic assessment, or a county or a town, that's straight up. It uses a ton of different frameworks, and it's very, very, very complete. That was actually intended. It was originally written to do commercial businesses. And then what I did is I took the frameworks and I had them adjusted to do public sector. So I can do public sector strategic assessments. And the feedback that I always get when I do the public sector ones is like, there's always a person in a group that says, "Oh no, I've done strategic planning. Oh yeah, I know how to do it." And then when I show up with my analytics, they're like, "Ah," and then it becomes like redemption time, and they'll make believe they knew it. And I just always say, so whenever I do the strategy work, just so you know, I'll show up my assessment. I said, please don't claim to be a strategist. Don't unless you know definitively the answer. Don't don't double down on something you don't know, because it could have the potential of being embarrassing. So if there's any more questions, no more questions. All right. Have a great one, folks. Ciao.